magic in the air. וכל הגוף בוער. Feel the magic in the air.
Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of the Planet Soccer Podcast. I am your sitting in third table host, Dylan, up here in Michigan. How are the lads? Up the mags with my co-host, Reed Simpson, the Spurs. I don't want to say depressed Spurs fan because you are still in the Champions League spot, but my co-host, Spurs fan, Reed, down in Texas. How are we doing today, Reed? You can be honest with the listeners. Okay.
I'm fine. I'm okay.
Not feeling threatened yet?
No, not by y'all. Certainly not.
You're not scared of Miguel Almiron long term?
Yeah, I mean, West Ham was sitting in third at this time last year, so I think they finished in a Europa Conference spot, which is probably where I expect y'all to be unless y'all splash $150 million in January.
Which is more likely than West Ham last year, to be fair.
Yes. Yeah. That's fair. We also had Wolves sitting eighth last year, which I think they finished relatively close to that, maybe 10th or 11th. But I'm just looking at the table and telling myself Tottenham was in ninth at this time last year. A lot of things can change.
Yeah, you guys were what? I want to say 6 points out of Champions League. When we say it this time last year, we're looking at calendar year, right? So not match week year?
Correct. Yeah.
But still, I mean, this date last year, you guys were sitting in ninth, 8 points back or whatever,
behind
6
Wolves,
points back.
Or I guess even with Wolves.
6 points back of Champions League, and you qualified. So it is certainly still early. We got given some grief on Twitter for calling Serie A early, so I'm not going to sit here and call Newcastle.
We really?
Yeah.
No,
my buddy who's one of the producers, one of my Twitter friends who is producer for Golasso gave us a hard time for calling Serie A because Napoli's up 8 points this early.
Serie A is over.
Serie A is a weird league, though, to be fair. He's not wrong. Serie A is an up and down streaky league historically. So it is probably, but regardless, I mean, we are sitting, we're through match week 15 of the EPL, I believe. So it is certainly still early, not quite as early as if you looked at calendar year last year. Obviously, we've talked about it a lot because of the World Cup, but there is still a lot to be played at this point in the Premier League season. But there are some notable shifts. I mean, I'll kind of dive right into it. We've talked the last couple of weeks about Man United. They look like they've kind of turned a corner, and then they come out last week and lay an absolute egg against Villa. And there's really no better way to put it than that. I mean, yes, Villa had the Emery boost, if you will, his first game as manager. That being said, United finally felt strong enough to captain Ronaldo, and it led to a 3-1 loss. So there's a whole, I mean, as listeners know, I am always a fan of when United struggles, but I'm even more of a fan when United struggles when they think they've turned the corner enough to captain Ronaldo and get worked 3-1. Did you have a chance to check in on this game at all, either live or retrospectively? Do you have any thoughts kind of on where these two teams stand at this point?
I think a lot of Villa's performance was a new manager bounce. To be honest, I think Man United will be one of those streaky teams all year. They'll probably finish in the top 6 on talent alone. I don't know necessarily what they could do in January to really bolster that squad, other than I don't know what fullbacks will be up on the market, and then I don't really know what you do in that midfield. You brought in Casemiro and Eriksen, who are two pretty aging players. But they're not guys that are going to want to sit on the bench. And you could create a lot of issues if you go in and you buy a midfielder in January who comes in and plays in front of one of these two guys. Ten Hag's system is obviously still a work in progress. It looks really good. Yeah. Some days it looks really bad, other days. So I don't know with Man United. I chalk this game up more to that new manager bounce that Villa probably had, but United did look very, very porous. I didn't watch the game live. I watched the extended highlights, and the captaining of Ronaldo. The Ronaldo thing just needs to be over at Man United. It really does. And Man United doesn't hold the lure that it does with a lot of people. With me, I've never, I feel like they were so good so long ago. Now it's like, are they really the United that everybody thinks they are? Are they going to be able to lure these huge players anymore? It just feels like it's all a past generation. And I don't think that they can get back to where they were, which is what kind of the argument becomes in the Man United camp. And you look at games like this, even with a new manager bounce, the Man Uniteds of the old, from what I've heard, they would not have lost this game. New manager bounce be damned. I think it's kind of a microcosm of what we'll see all year, the rest of the year from Man United. So, and then Villa, good win for Villa. They've only won 2 of their last 5, but for a team that was sitting in the relegation zone 3 weeks ago, it's up to 13th now. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of like what you said is, the Manchester United of old, but like when was that? Like the last time they've had true European success was, I want to say like 2010 or 2011. I think they finished runner-up, and then a couple of years before that, they won Champions League. But like internationally, they haven't had much success in quite a while. They've won some EFL Cups and some FA Cups in the last, 20 some odd years. They have a couple of first place finishes in the league. But when you look at the last 10 years, I think they've only finished in Champions League spot twice, maybe 3 times, maybe 15, 16 they might have got in. I think they finished 5th, but they could have got in on one of those. The cup qualifier was an automatic bid. But for, like you said, like this Man United lore, like where are we at with it? Because at a certain point, history does attract talent in the transfer market, but when does history run its course? Like are the 22, 23-year-olds who have never really been
exposed
super conscious
to that,
or exposed exactly in the world of international football, is it still that draw? Is it still that lore? I think there's a lot of argument that it still is, because at the end of the day, it is a massive brand. It's one of the probably 4 largest brands in England, in the largest league in the world. So I think there is certainly still some draw there. But it's at the point where if I'm a player, I got to see results, and we just haven't seen results as of late. We haven't seen results as of this year. They made a lot of splash signings with the extended summer window that still have them sitting on the outside looking in. I mean, they're right now, what are they, 3 or 4 points with a game in hand, but 3 or 4 points, I believe, out of Champions League spot. And losing games like this 3-1 to Villa that could have been a lot worse. I mean, when you look at the attacking momentum, or if you watch the game live, or even just the extended highlights, you could see that there was a lot of chances for this to be worse. I mean, they were down by 2 goals in the first 15 minutes, and Villa didn't necessarily let up that pressure. So I think there are still, in my opinion, a lot of question marks around Man U. As far as the Ronaldo captaincy goes, I think it may have been a bit early and a bit forced. It was a point at which they probably felt like they had to cater to him a little bit because of where he's been at, and it probably was becoming a locker room or a dressing room issue. But that's not the sign I want. Like when you look at the cities who seem to have no problems internally, or the Uniteds, or, I mean, we can make jokes about Spurs tactically till we're blue in the face, but it doesn't seem like there's a locker room issue with that side, or a distrust in the manager in that side. And a random captaincy of Ronaldo kind of makes me feel that way a little bit about Manchester United. And it's nothing against Ten Hag. I mean, I said it on air with this show, like when he was hired, it was a scary hire for me, because he felt like the right fit for United. So I certainly think long term that they are going to be fine with Ten Hag. I think it might take a little longer than Man United fans had wanted, especially with the signings that they had. But he does play a brand of football that wasn't necessarily conducive to the team he was given. So it's going to be a 2 or 3 transfer window process, most likely, for them to really get back to where they want to be with him. Now, that's not saying they can't, squeeze out a Champions League finish this year. I definitely think with, what are we at? 6-7 months left of the season in theory. He definitely still can produce that with him with that side, but there are a lot of questions right now for Man U for me, and obviously a 3-1 loss to a Villa who lost 4-1 the week before is raising some questions, to be sure.
Yeah, I think with Ten Hag, his I'm a Spurs fan, so to talk tactics kind of seems hypocritical. But in terms of tactically for Ten Hag, I think he's just, and you see this a lot with Dutch managers, they're very vanilla. They don't do anything crazy. They all play the same system. They play the same way. So to think that Ten Hag is going to work some kind of miracle with Man United might be jest in my mind. I think that it might be a little unrealistic, but for him, it's one of those things where it's not a Pep where you're going to see the perfect symmetry, the creativeness, and it'll try to imitate that, but it's much more compact. It's built from the back, and it's that total football, but it's a predictable brand of total football, I think, and I think he's going to have to spend a lot of money to get players to win with his system in the Premier League because it's not going to catch anybody by surprise, which is fine. They may be able to spend that money. A lot of teams are spending that money now. But I don't think from a purely manager perspective, kind of like Graham Potter's done, taking the, obviously Chelsea didn't perform to those standards this past week, but what he did with Brighton, just this kind of revolutionary, there's a lot of things to be said about Graham Potter's system. It's very inconsistent and it can be very defensive at times, but also very offensive. But it's one of those things where it's electric and it can produce wins at any time or losses at any time. But if you perfect it, it works out really well, like what we saw with Brighton. On the other hand, with Ten Hag, it's just, like I said, it feels vanilla to me, and you're going to need really good individual players to get the best out of that system, which is what we saw at Ajax. He just kind of overpowered that league. And then his teams at Ajax that made it to an extended point in the Champions League had those very good players that were being sold for $90 million the next summer. So that's kind of my last thoughts on United, I would say.
Yeah, for me, my last kind of thought is this is an ugly loss. They have had a bit of a roller coaster of a season, but when you look at the last month as a whole, or month and a half, really, I think we're on a 9-game unbeaten streak going into this. So while it was an ugly performance and they were outclassed in every facet, I am a little hesitant to throw up huge worries or huge caution at this point. It's something to keep an eye on with Man U, but I think part of the reason both you and I are a little skeptical of Man U is probably a little bit jaded, a little bit optimistic in a way. Neither of us like Man U very much, so we're hoping for them to not succeed. But in reality, they've not had. This was their first loss in 10 matches, I believe. So I am a little hesitant to, make any large statements against Man United. We'll see how they finish out before the World Cup break. I believe they actually get Villa again in the Cup, and then they get Fulham, and that's 2 chances to right the ship. You get 2 wins there, and I think everybody forgets about this Villa loss. And I think there's a good chance they can make that happen. They do get Villa at home during the week. And then they play on the road at Fulham, but Fulham is a team that if you are a Man United side that is looking to threaten for a Champions League spot, that's a match you have to take 3 points from. So I'm willing to reserve judgment fully on Man United until the end of this week, but it is certainly a bit of a head scratcher and for United fans a bit frustrating, I'm sure, seeing that the team started to seem like they were turning a corner and then lay an absolute egg at Villa. And on the reverse side, though, to not laying an egg would be Leicester this week. You and I both have kind of been almost waiting for Leicester to kind of hit their stride. We keep talking about how talented they are, and if come January they're in a poor table position, we expected them to sell, and they've really been able to, I don't want to say put that to bed, because they are still sitting in 14th, but only 2 points out of relegation. But they have won 3 of their last 4, with the one loss being a 1-0 loss to City. And before that, I believe their loss before that was Bournemouth, back when we were talking about them reeling. But they certainly showed an ability to bounce back from all of that. They had a really nice match against Everton, who kind of on the flip side, Everton is really struggling now. They've lost 3 of their last 5, while Leicester's won 3 of their last 5. And they've essentially, for lack of more analysis, flip-flopped in the table. And we now see Everton sitting at 16th, tied with Leicester on 14 points. But based on form right now, Leicester definitely seems to be the side in better form and more poised to break out of this come that January deadline. I think they are now likely in a spot where they are unlikely to sell at the deadline. I also think Everton is likely in a spot, maybe not financially, but where they're at in their season and where they're at in their needs, needing a striker that we could see them spend a little bit of money to try and stay up to find that goal scorer, because that's just something that they've lacked so heavily thus far.
What goal scorer that's going to make a difference is going to a 16th place Everton, though? You know,
you can say that, and it is a slightly different project, if you will, than Newcastle. But last year, I mean, if we're talking about where standings were on this day 365 days ago, I mean, Newcastle was 19th, literally had not won a single game yet, and was able to have a very successful window. Obviously, there are other factors at play. Obviously, the takeover made it an attractive project for the Trippiers, the Brunos, like the guys Newcastle was able to sign in January. But Everton does, as much as I can't stand Everton and their fans, they do have a really attractive brand to some of those, not necessarily top flight players, not top tier players, but certainly top flight players that could come in and make an impact. And I don't have a name offhand, because I admittedly don't spend time on the transfer market worrying about what Everton's going to do at this point. This time last year, I may have been worrying about that, but I'm not worrying about that currently, personally. So I can't name you a guy, but I don't think their table standing necessarily will be restrictive in what they're able to accomplish in the window. When you do have the likes of Bournemouth, Southampton, Wolves, Forest all below them, I think Everton is a much more attractive project than any of those. They have the new stadium being built. They have a rabid fan base and a lot of history. So I think there is a chance, a good chance Everton stays up. But when they've lost 3 of their last 5, they've taken 4 points out of their last 5. It is a point where you start to question Everton's long-term ability, especially when I think the points that they got were against Fulham and Crystal, when Crystal was really struggling. And outside of that, I think their last one was Southampton or something of that nature. So there are definitely questions around
terrible.
Everton. They're
Sorry,
bad.
I know you want. I know you want to talk about how good Newcastle was, but God,
no, Southampton's bad, and I don't know where it came from. All right, so we were talking. Let's look. We were talking earlier. A year ago today, where was Southampton? Was 8 points clear, I think, of either 8 or 6 points clear of relegation.
6 points clear of relegation and 13th. Yeah,
and now it's Wolves, Bournemouth, and Nottingham it's a 1-dog, or it's a 4-dog race for one clean spot, it feels like. And I'm just not confident in Southampton. I like Che Adams a lot. I think James Ward-Prowse is a very solid midfielder, but there are certainly questions there. But I do unfortunately have some faith that Everton in turn will be able to turn this around. And I wonder
if Everton could go get a guy like Mehdi Taremi from Porto. who's lit the world on fire this year. He's 30 years old. He would probably cost him 20 to 25 million if Porto say, well, I guess they've been drawn into the round of 16, which starts in February. So Porto would probably want to hang on to their top goal scorer, but I don't know.
He's a guy though, like he's going to be asked to do a lot at the World Cup. Yeah. I think that could possibly price him out of a move out of Porto with the mixture of him being one of the leading guys.
If he sends Iran to the round of 16, if he gets them
right and
scores 4 goals in 3 games, and
you couple that with Porto still being in a Champions League spot come February, I think that is a guy that's going to be tough to. And I think again that's just where this year is so different. I mean, he's a guy in normal January transfers. You go, yeah, there's a good chance because at that point in the year, there's a strong likelihood that Porto's out of Champions League by that point, and it is a position where Everton could see to buy a player. But I think it could prove, like you said, it could prove difficult for Everton to find that striker that will score them enough goals to stay up. And that really feels like that's where they're at. They aren't a bad team. They're just a team that I don't know if they have enough goal scoring to stay up at this point. And then on the flip side, Leicester, who just beat them, has had all the goal scoring ability in the world this season, just hasn't been able to put it together. And now with 3 out of 5 wins, we're starting to see that come together. Tielemans had a absolute gorgeous goal this past weekend, and Madison played really well. And so so Newcastle fans, Arsenal fans, I think Tottenham fans were all kind of like almost hoping, like I enjoy Leicester, but I was kind of hoping they would fall off so Madison would be available for us 3 plus clubs, because I think he would be obviously a phenomenal addition to all 3 clubs. But I think that's a guy for the last 2 months I've really had my eye on as a Newcastle fan, and somebody that I'm realizing with this success that I'm enjoying from Leicester, he's likely to become very unavailable, as well as Tielemans in January, because while they do have some financial troubles, selling one of those guys for $30 to $60 million isn't going to offset a possible relegation. So I do think they will do everything they can. If they have to let Tielemans walk in the summer, they let him walk in the summer. But at this point, I think it's going to be all about ensuring that they don't get relegated. And I honestly don't see those 2 guys being available at this point.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, unless they get a way above market price for James Madison, I think. And I
don't think anybody will do that with Tielemans because of his contract. There is a chance it happens with Madison. Yeah. With Tielemans, I don't see anybody overspending. So with them still being in the hunt, I think the Tielemans market is going to cool down drastically because Madison has at least another year. I don't know exactly offhand how many he has, but he has at least another year on his contract. I don't see him being somebody that moves until summer at the earliest, unfortunately, for our 2 clubs, because I think he would have been a great addition.
Yep, agreed.
Do you want the next game, or do you want me to?
Are we talking Liverpool Spurs now?
Yeah, we probably should. I'll let you go on your start the clock 5-minute Tottenham rant.
I don't even think it'll be 5 minutes. Here's the deal. Tottenham they've caught an injury bug. Caught an injury bug. Pretty significant one.
Massive.
I think whenever you have 3 genuine starters who would start, like we said last week, for 75% of the league, it's going to be tough to score goals with a team that, you think, Tottenham doesn't score that much, but we're sitting like 3rd in the league in goals scored or something weird. In this calendar year, I think we're 2nd only to City in goals scored. So it's one of those things where there's been a lot of mumblings on Spurs Twitter recently about the World Cup coming up, and we've had Christian Romero now sitting out for 2.5 weeks. Obviously, Sonny's out, which is a legit injury. Rodrigo Betancourt's and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg basically put their life on the line in the midfield, and props to them for doing so, both of whom will be starters for their World Cup team. It just feels like there's a lot of eyes looking forward to this international tournament. And it's kind of a theme throughout the league. We talked about it off air before we came on, and You have Lisandro Martinez. Now looks like he's going to be sitting out for a couple games for Man United to finish this round of games off before the World Cup. To a lot of these countries, Argentina most notably, these guys really want to win this tournament. So they might be taking a bit of their foot off the pedal. There's the video of Richarlison, who I know he's Brazil, not Argentina, legitimately like doing jumping jacks pretty much after he found out he made the World Cup roster. And that's a guy who's apparently unfit to even train for Tottenham right now. I think he just got outside for training. But, I mean, this guy's basically doing flips, jumping jacks in the air after having made the World Cup roster. It just feels very like the Tottenham players are just uninterested in playing for Tottenham right now. And that's fine because we have so many World Cup. I think our entire starting 11 outside of Eric Dyer, who probably won't end up making the England roster, and Emerson.
I got plenty of thoughts on Eric Dyer.
Yeah,
continue.
And Emerson Royale, who obviously didn't make the Brazil roster. They're pretty much all World Cup players. So I don't know. And with Conte, there's a bit of a game of chicken being played between Conte and the Spurs board. Speaking to his extension, I know we're not talking about the game at all, but it's just the game was just kind of a microcosm of what Tottenham's been all season. Outside of that Trent play where he extends, doesn't play the ball, takes Sessegnon down in the box, which is almost an identical play to João Cancelo the day before.
It took longer than I thought. I should have done a stopwatch on that. Which
earned him a red card.
Hold on. We're talking about officiating. When I wrote this down too. I thought compared to Cancelo's it was bad, but we're not blaming the loss on officiating, right?
No.
Okay. All right. I did that earlier. I hope I didn't say that. And I got a lot of slack. Like I got a lot of crap for it, but no, yeah, it was a stark contrast to the Cancelo decision. So when I saw, I didn't see it live, but when I saw it on replay, I was very surprised because it did look very similar. There was the one back angle that looked a little better, if you will, on the Liverpool foul. It looked a little less egregious, but still, it looked questionable to say. And at that point in the game, that changes a lot of the game. So I definitely think it's worth mentioning the discrepancies, if you will, between the two fouls.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you have Dyer who heads it right to Mo Salah to score.
So
I think Spurs hit the bar 4 times in that one. It's just one of those games where it's like, sure, whatever. Like that was a Spursy game, and it sucks to not be able to get a draw. We're sitting on 2 draws. We've got more wins than y'all, which this isn't me like dissing y'all, but y'all have got 6 draws. I mean, it's like you avoid losses, and that's what you have to do in a game like that. And Tottenham wasn't able to do it, so that is frustrating. Tottenham will sign a center back in January, and it will be a center back that's north of $60 million. And that's exciting. And I think Denzel Dumfries is looking pretty likely at this point at right wing back, which would be a big offensive upgrade, obviously. I think who was the other name that I've seen? I forgot who it was exactly, but who's Atleti's right wing back? Shoot.
Why am I not thinking of it either?
Whatever. The Emerson's going to be upgraded, so it's kind of like I'm at the point where just get us to January or get us to the World Cup, get us to January, and let's figure this thing out around the corner, because last year was such a roller coaster of a year. It's crazy to think that this year's been more steady than last year for Tottenham and for Newcastle, obviously, but y'all have seen a noticeable difference in where you're at in the table. But to be at this, I mean, I think we were still in like 7th or 8th even after match week 14 last year. I know we looked calendar day versus actual match week, but it didn't get much better in those next few games. It really, January is when it started picking up. So I don't know. It's been frustrating, been really up and down at the end of the day. Moving on in the Champions League, it'll be a fun draw with AC Milan. Be fun to watch games at the San Siro. And yeah, just get us to the World Cup, avoid any more injuries, and hopefully, I honestly don't even know. I honestly don't even know who we have on the weekend.
I was about to say, who do you have on the weekend? Because I think
Leeds.
that is and that is a chance. I know we're both pseudo Leeds fans, but that's a chance to signal a little bit more intent.
It's a tough game though, because like I've said, Leeds is going to. They always play the Us's, the Chelseas, the Liverpools,
and it's a side that with where the current Spurs, like full health Spurs, I don't think you struggle with that side at all. But with your current side, like I get a worry there. I mean, no Son, no Richarlison. I'm guessing Kulusevski will play.
He will start, and that's one thing about
90, and that made a massive difference. Yeah,
when he came on, the team looked completely different, and they always do when Dejan Kulusevski's on the field.
I mean, he's one of
he's better than Luis Diaz. He's better than. I just always like to throw that in there because they get compared coming in the same window. But he's an absolute game changer. He's a creative brick wall, which I mean it's exactly what you need in the Premier League. He doesn't get pushed over, but he's also got the creativity. He's got the beautiful left foot being on the right wing. And it's somebody that we really need back in the lineup. Now the question is, do you stay with the two up top because you still only have Bryan Heel and Lucas Moura, who are the other two available wingers? Richarlison and Son still out, so. I mean, I'm assuming Richarlison's still out. I haven't seen him.
I would assume he won't play. I will say, you're kind of giving a knock on him about his reaction, and I fully, if it was my own, like if Bruno, because Bruno had almost the same reaction when he got selected, like it was all over Newcastle Twitter. But if Bruno was out hurt right now, I'd be feeling the same way you are. Like, yay, I'm excited for you, but like, hey man, where's that energy, that fitness when? Yeah.
I'm not mad at
league matches,
but it's like, come on.
It's frustrating, though. Yeah, no, it's frustrating. But I will also say, for me, you said that game was a microcosm of Spurs. That whole Richarlison situation, to me, as a Richarlison hater for as long as I've followed leagues he's been in, that's a microcosm of Richarlison. He is a little bit about himself, and I think that is a struggle when building a English or really any international power football team, is wanting that talent but getting guys that will also buy into the system. And I think that's something that Pep at times is undervalued for. We always talk about the money City spends, but everybody in that system for the last, I mean, even pre-Pep for the last 15 years was buying into that system that they put together at Man City. And it's a really tough balancing act, because I mean, Richarlison felt like the perfect strategic tactical ability signing for Spurs, but now we're running into a possibly, and I don't want to speculate against somebody else's health, but possibly, and it sounds like you from a Spurs fan perspective, possibly a situation where he's putting himself and his international club ahead of his club. So it's a tough balancing act, and I'm not trying to knock Spurs for signing him because it did make all the sense in the world, but it's a tough job for a manager to do, especially in this weird World Cup year where we have a World Cup in December, because that's just not something any manager has ever encountered, so they don't really know how to handle or approach it.
Yeah, two things on that. I think Richarlison's been an incredible culture signing. He's been great in the locker room.
Yeah, you guys like Christian Romero, so...
he was a noted, loved Everton player also. I think fan bases wherever he's gone, it's one of those you hear it all the time. He's on your team, you freaking love the guy.
Yeah,
if he's
not,
Rasheed Wallace.
He's Rasheed Wallace for any of our former NBA fans of the Premier League. Like, he's scrappy, he's kind of grimy, but he's that guy on your team. You wouldn't want him anywhere else. He's your guy.
The second part of this is if this podcast finds the wrong part of the world, we're going to be in a lot of trouble for me saying this. That attitude is just what you get with Brazil players. It just is.
Is it?
It just is. You can talk about Bruno all you want to.
Bruno and Big Joe.
He is okay. Big Joe is not. He's not a Brazil national. Like
he made the 55,
but he's not one of those guys.
There were numerous people that thought he should. Not even just Newcastle people. A lot of people that thought he should have made the roster over Fred.
Okay, Dylan, Neymar. Anthony.
Okay, I'm not comparing him
Richarlison.
to Neymar or Anthony. I'm talking about that bench of Brazil. If Joelinton made it over Fred, I think it would have been split. Just like it's split that Fred made it over Joelinton. So he's on.
Wait, what are we
level.
talking about right now exactly? Are we talking about who should have made the squad?
No, but
or
just
the attitude of Brazilian players.
The attitude of Brazilian players, and he
so are you
should have made the squad, and he does not fit that mold you're talking about. And neither does Bruno.
No, I agree, but he's
so maybe
not
we just found the right Brazilians. We'll go with that. We'll end on that. We found the right Brazilians for club.
And I think if you found the Brazilians that I think are known for that, they would be at the Real Madrids of the world or the Barcelonas of the world.
Sure. And that's, to be fair, that's always been one of Brazil as an international side's question marks.
Yeah.
Is the individualism versus the greater picture. And I think there are now, and again, I'm biased about our two Brazilians that will buy into that team picture. As much as I don't like him because he went to West Ham, all intents and purposes, it sounds like Paqueta is that type of person. So I just don't know if it's necessarily fair to stereotype all Brazilians that way. If we want to do the majority of starting 11 Brazilians, the Richarlisons, the Neymars, then yes, I would be willing to agree with that statement.
It's not okay. I have to defend myself here because it's not an outlandish thing for me to say. It's
it's
a known thing in the soccer world. Brazilians,
for sure,
and not even that they're like very individual. They care about their national team,
right?
Lot,
just like we're seeing with
experience.
Argentina right now, because we're seeing Argentina. It's Messi's last run, so we're seeing Lisandro Martinez. Like we're seeing Argentinians do the same thing. So I'm not trying to. Well, I kind of was trying to fault Richarlison because I don't like Richarlison, but my bias will never not show through on Richarlison. But I do think that's just another crazy wrinkle in this year. Is like, yes, it was a class signing for you guys. It was a great signing, but it did come with, if you want to call it a risk of how he would handle this month before the World Cup, then yeah, it's a risk. And I think the good news is you guys have put yourself in a position even with this risk of not getting Richarlison, this massive signing for a month leading up to the World Cup, that you're still in a good spot. You're still in the Champions League spot, and that's a good spot to be in. And I think that's kind of a little bit what you were building on was, yes, there are some concerns right now for Tottenham. Yes, you're not where you thought you would be, where I thought you would be, where many people thought you would be at the start of the season going into the World Cup. It's actually
honestly exactly where I thought we would be, sitting fourth. But it just
with the ability to push forward.
The way that the fourth has been obtained has been less than ideal.
Frustrating.
Which it's weird to like complain about that, but it's just kind of
I'll
the
ask
way
this, and this is probably a little centric of me. Would you be less frustrated if it was Chelsea in third?
No, I don't think so at all. I would actually be way more upset if it was Chelsea in third.
Well, all right, that's probably not true. Man United, like I'm just more saying, does it bother
lean
Spurs
more on
fans?
I lean more on the side of being happy for you. I lean more the side of being happy for you.
You personally, I get that because I mean we're co-hosts. Like I inadvertently find myself pulling for Spurs when I don't actually care what's going on. Yeah. But like just as a general sentiment, I just wondered if it was all right, we're behind the guys who were in 19th at this point last year. Is that the frustration, or is it just purely more on the Spurs on-field performance and not necessarily just the Spurs?
I think
community.
It's surprising that it's y'all, but we all knew it was going to happen at some point. So it's like there was that mental preparation of, okay, Newcastle's coming. It's also kind of like, you know, obviously not to take anything away from y'all, and you've said this multiple times. It's like do you want Champions League? Do you think that's actually obtainable right now for this squad?
Or ideal,
it's,
even.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I'm sitting here thinking, okay, they have less wins. They've drawn a lot. If you have injuries right now, so you're pushing through those injuries, which is really impressive because one of the questions with you guys was your depth.
Yeah.
So to weather that storm is certainly impressive, but I just always it shocked me how long the Premier League season was last year. And I saw how many twists and how many turns. And this is by no means a finished product for Spurs, for Newcastle, for City, for Arsenal, for anybody. I would have put money on Leicester getting relegated 4 weeks ago. They looked so bad, and now it's just completely
and now we're like,
different.
Now I led the show with, they're safe.
Yeah.
I feel like I am a hot take guy the last month, like you said, because stuff changes so fast.
Yeah,
just same thing. A month ago, I was Spurs are. There's no way you guys are missing out on Champions League, and I still think I would be surprised if you did. But now there's that question in the back of my mind. And a month ago, I go, 0 chance Newcastle qualifies for Champions League. And now there's that thought in my mind. I go, well, shit, maybe we can. And maybe Spurs will come out with an inconvenient knock at the World Cup.
I think
maybe stuff changes like crazy. I'm tired of saying this almost. It's a weird year. I'm almost excited in a way for the World Cup to be over so I can stop talking about how weird of a year it is on our podcast. Because then once January hits, we'll be relatively back to normal. It'll be back to normal. Champions League's a little bit pushed back, but for the most part, we'll be in a very normal year once the World Cup ends.
Which will be, at that point, you're almost looking at it from my perspective. Do I want to be playing Champions League semifinals while I'm battling for 4th in the Premier League? The answer is yes. Because
I was going to say
we can win the Champions League, but then at the same time, if you end up, I don't know, probably
realistically,
not with the team that we have right now.
Right.
But I also I'll wait for when we talk about Newcastle. But yeah, I don't know. It's just every part of me when I listen to Spurs podcasts or read the articles that Alistair Gold puts out on football.london, it's like, guys, we're in a better position than we were in a year ago, but it feels worse, which is weird.
It's just higher expectations this year. That's all it is.
And it's I've seen, for sure. And you hear people, they're like, okay, rate Antonio Conte's first year out of 10. And I'm looking at it like, well, what has he not done that we needed? Yeah, what has he not done that we needed him to do? He finished off 4. We advanced out of the group, but nothing's looked sexy. So it's like results 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, but aesthetics 3 out of 10, all around vibes like 7 out of 10. So
you should have known that's what you were getting from Conte, though, because that's Conte.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a sexy manager. He's not going to put on a masterclass of.
But I think given the right player, like if those if he has wing backs that are competent offensively, then it's like it can be a pretty sexy system.
Right, and
but
he
it's
just isn't in a situation
with the clunkers that we
be.
have. It's just not. It's a pain to watch, and I don't even think I finished my thought earlier when I was saying it's a game of chicken between Conte and the front office. They're like, okay, who's going to commit first? Is Conte going to commit to us? Then we'll give him $150 million in January to spend. And Conte's like, are they going to give me $150 million and then I'll commit? So it's so that's one of those things you get into when you're competing at the top like this. And I guess let's do you want to talk about Liverpool at all? I mean, they capitalized on their chances they needed to.
Yeah, Liverpool capitalized on chances. They didn't dominate a game. I'm back where I was a week ago. This is a good win for Liverpool, but I am not convinced yet.
It's a good win in the sense of it's a win at Spurs, but it's a win.
It's a win at a
confidence.
Top 4 side, which is always, don't get me wrong, very nice to have. Without diving into this too much, because I think we'll probably spend more time on this next week. This time we're going to do a mid-season, even though it's not quite mid-season, wrap up of the Premier League. So I don't want to get too much into the the talks about the possible sale of Liverpool today. A lot of that did come out today. Fenway Sports Group is planning or has submitted a request to their banking institutions to essentially evaluate their
broker
club
value.
Yeah, and see what they should ask.
Appraise
what they
the
can
club.
Get. Essentially, yeah. You, right up your alley. Maybe you can go work for them on this one.
If you guys need an appraisal of Anfield, let me know.
But so I don't want to speak too much on their long-term future because it's too unknown for right now. I think I want to let it play out at least another week and see. But strictly from a tactical point of view, while they did get out to a hot start and looked like they dominated the first half, as many teams look like they do against Spurs.
Every team.
I don't think they probably took as much.
Wrexham AFC could come into Tottenham Hotspur Stadium
just
and
in the
first half.
2-0, and then who knows? Because Conte will have his halftime speech.
Yeah,
but I mean, for me, they probably missed out on some chances in that first half to make it a wider gap. And there's still a lot of questions in that midfield for me.
Harvey Elliott's now hurt, so that's another midfielder down.
There are infinite number of questions. I think at this point, Klopp is probably desperate for a sale to hurry up and happen before January, which I think is extremely unlikely.
It's not going to happen.
So I think we are likely seeing, and because they are likely, it sounds like in the process of a sale, unlikely to see, I should say, any massive signings in January. So I think this is very well a Liverpool team we could see finish outside of Europa League. And
this Fenway Sports Group is not spending money in January if they're selling
right, if they're planning on selling. And I don't blame them. Not even like a knock on Fenway Sports Group. If I plan on selling the club, I'm not spending jack.
It's just not smart business.
Right, because then that goes into the valuation so differently, and it's taking on more debt, but adding an asset. I just wouldn't personally ever want to deal with that. So I think there's a good chance that this is very close to the Liverpool team we see finish the season. And I think there are lots of questions about if this Liverpool team
their Champions League draw.
Oh, right. Well, all right. So hear me out. I almost think their Champions League draw is a benefit. They got out of groups, so they're getting that round of 16 money.
Funny.
And we've heard how
Salah's 50th redemption arc.
We have heard from Barcelona's side how financially important qualifying out of group stages can be in Champions League. So I think the fact that they qualified is a huge plus. I almost think the fact that they
$9.9 million.
I almost think the fact that they drew Real. Bear with me, Liverpool fans, the three that probably listen to us still after I bash them every week. I almost think it's a good thing for them. Because
of TV revenue?
No. Similar to like what I said with Newcastle, it's almost too early for Newcastle to compete in Champions League. So I almost think if Liverpool had a more attractive draw and they saw a run available to them in Champions League, they might spend on the not so wise end to make a push, possibly to make that sale more attractive. This is some
mental gymnastics for me right now.
Like if you're trying to sell a team that just made the semifinals, in theory, you have more value there. But they would likely have to spend money to get there. But now, if they just get knocked out in the round of 16, but
so you're saying they drew Real Madrid, so let's just throw in the financial towel, essentially.
Hey,
let's
round
not
of
do anything
out
dumb.
of it. Let's not be stupid. Let's focus on trying to secure a top four still. And then you put all of your energy, motivation, player fitness in a top four. And it's crazy that we're at this point on November 7th that I'm talking about Liverpool doing everything they can to just qualify for Champions League, but that's kind of where they're at. And in that respect, I almost think it might be better for them to just throw in the towel. So it may, in a backwards way, I love that they drew Real because it means they will fail, and I like seeing Liverpool fail. But from a grander perspective, I think you could find a silver lining in it if you're a Liverpool fan. And I don't know why I'm trying to make Liverpool fans feel better, but here I am playing devil's advocate.
If Mo Salah goes out for a month for this team, They're finishing
done.
10th,
They're
11th.
done.
Because
All right. I don't know about 10th or 11th, but they are.
What are they
8th
sitting
or
in
9th.
right now? 8th?
Yeah.
Fulham
but
finishes ahead of them for sure if
No.
Mo Salah goes down for a month. Fulham might finish ahead of them now.
No, they won't. Come on. That back line is still talented. I haven't seen it this year. That back line is still talented. Darwin Nunez, as much as we love to hate on Darwin Nunez on this show, is still a very good striker. They still have guys who can facilitate him. They still can and should be a team to finish 8th or better, regardless. No, I don't want to say regardless of injury. They lose 3 guys, then sure. They lose a guy, even Salah. This is a team that better frickin' finish 8th. Like all right, outside of Kane, you take anybody away from Tottenham, even outside Kane, you guys finish top 8. You take Haaland outside of Man City.
Okay,
top 8.
They're a super team. You take Kane out of Tottenham, I'm not promising you.
You're finishing
place.
top 8. You take Jesus out of Arsenal, they're finishing top 8. You take
Jesus hasn't done shit since August.
That's not true. Are we watching games or are we looking at stat lines? All right, here we go. We're jumping into my next. It wasn't going to be my next, but we talked Newcastle. We're now talking Arsenal. So let's just talk about
are we done talking Newcastle?
No, we're talking Newcastle and Arsenal. It's
okay.
I'm packaging it. They're a package deal right now because you can argue they're the 2 hottest, most impressive by all standards, most impressive teams this year.
Besides,
both teams
besides goal differential, expected goal, expected points,
impressive based on
relative to expectations.
Exactly.
Okay. That's a pretty big qualifier to put in there.
All right, I'm sorry I'm not going to sit here and drool over City, who we all drooled over all summer and all last year and for the last 5 years. I'm not going to sit here and waste time on a podcast talking about how amazing City is. We know they're good. City is City. City is the Real plus of the Premier League. But expectations-wise and current form-wise, it's hard to argue that there are 2 more impressive teams than Arsenal and then Newcastle. And I think the way they've gone about it has been incredibly similar in a lot of respects. They're trying to build a team that fits their manager and fits what they already had when that new manager was installed, which, relatively speaking, has been somewhat recent. And within high club investment, but not ceiling club investment. We're not seeing City money. We're not seeing Real money. We are seeing lots of money infused into both teams, but we're not seeing disgusting sums of money. I mean, Newcastle's back line cost less than $70 million on the transfer
I think Arsenal
market.
was like the 5th highest spender in all of Europe this summer, which is a lot.
But
yeah,
who was ahead of them? There were two or three Premier League teams ahead of them, though. Were Liverpool and Newcastle not both ahead of Arsenal? I thought they were.
I think it was just Bayern, Real Madrid, and Barcelona.
Oh, you're saying just summer, not like this calendar year.
Yeah, just in the summer window.
Then yes, yeah. But I mean, we're not seeing them splash hundreds of millions on single players. They're doing it in a wise way. Leading up to the season, I was applauding prior to the Nunez signing how Liverpool spends money, and it felt Arsenal this summer felt very Liverpool spending-esque, where they spent what seemed wisely with a limited budget. And that's the thing. When you're talking about top 6, big 7 now with Newcastle money, like when you're talking about money, you have to do it relatively.
Yeah.
So in relation to the big 6, big 7, they're not like blowing teams out of the water. They're spending way more than the bottom half, but they're still spending a relatively reasonable amount, both clubs. And they're doing it wisely. They're not doing it frivolously. They're not doing it on players that aren't performing. Outside Newcastle spending $70 million on Isak, who's played 3 games, but injuries are a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But the fact that these two teams have been able to do what they've done outside of or beyond expectations is exciting for both clubs, to say the least. I mean, I found a stat. Arsenal, it's the first time winning 3 straight matches against Big Six since 2012. So they haven't won 3 straight against the Big Six in 10 years.
Yeah, they've been a banter club.
Says the guy with no trophies. I mean,
Tottenham is the 4th most trophies in England in the history of football.
Okay, you sound like a Michigan football fan now. Oh, we used to be really good before, integration. But relatively speaking, they've been 2 impressive sides. This weekend, Arsenal it was just a 1-0 victory, but it was at Stamford Bridge, a place I know haunts you. Aubameyang made all the comments under the sun leading up to the match. It's not personal. I bleed blue. Whatever.
Okay,
whatever.
That was their social media team saying, "Here's what to say."
But it was still said, and he got shut down beyond belief this weekend.
Aubameyang sucks. That dude, I've never seen him do anything. I started watching soccer a year and a half ago.
I was gonna say I disagree that he sucks. He has all the talent in the world. He's not always.
He's sucked this year.
Yeah, he's been bad at Chelsea. Chelsea's been bad when they've played him in that role. Which when they made the signing, I think I was one of the first people to say it felt like a great signing. At the time, it was because he had a great relationship with their manager that they sacked 2 weeks later. But it felt like a position of need for them and a position he fit well. And he laid an absolute stinker against Arsenal. It was only a 1-0 victory, but it was on the road at Stamford Bridge. They dominated all facets of the game. It really could have been more. On the flip side, Newcastle, another 3+ goal differential victory. The anger in the side when we gave up a goal in the 82nd or whatever it was to blow the clean sheet was kind of invigorating. Like that's something that Steve Bruce, we would never seen a 4-goal lead at all. But under Steve Bruce, that goal's given up and the guys shrug it off oh, we don't care, we won. So just seeing what Eddie Howe's been able to do for the mentality of the team is promising for Newcastle. And I think it's really similar for Arsenal with Arteta. I think it's an exciting time for 2 clubs that have extremely storied, Arsenal more so than Newcastle, but storied club history and rabid.
So history
bases.
Does matter, just for the record. Storied histories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
I wasn't disagreeing that history matters. I just think it's funny when Spurs fans talk about history. When Spurs fans I don't talk about recent history because I'm a Newcastle fan. Haven't made Europe in 10 years. But I just think it's funny when Spurs fans talk about success, especially in league and domestic competition, because it's something we haven't seen from Spurs. That all aside, all I'm getting at here, very exciting year for Newcastle, very exciting year for Arsenal, both ahead of Spurs. One of the two, Newcastle aside, I think Arsenal, and 2 weeks ago I was very on the fence about this, I think Arsenal has a very legitimate chance to compete for the league at this point. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because when you go position by position, bench by, there is no point on the Arsenal side where I go, they have a clear and definitive advantage over City, but we're sitting 15 games in and they're up 2 points.
We're 13
it's hard to argue
in.
with that. Are they only 15 weeks in, they each had the extra, they each have 13 games in, but they're even, and they're sitting 2 points above. It's hard to argue that they could compete. When it's all said and done, I've said this since week 5 when I started tooting Arsenal's horn, I don't think they have the ability and the talent to stick with it. But at this point, we're going to go into the World Cup where they're either in first or a point off of first. Like that, and I think that is an incredible achievement for a team that absolutely collapsed at the second half of last year. I think it's a class job by Arteta rallying that team this season. And if I were an Arsenal fan, I would be extremely optimistic that some money is spent on that midfield and a legitimate push is made. I think a month ago on the podcast, I stated I don't know if I would make a push if I were Arsenal for the same reasons as Newcastle, because there's no sense in rushing it and overspending. But I also don't know if you're going to have a better chance to compete with City 2 years from now when they still have Haaland and they have had 2 more summer windows.
With Arsenal, you have to be really careful with Arsenal because they got a lot of extensions they got to get done by
They do.
I think it's this summer. I think they've got to get Saka done, Martinelli done, and Saliba done before this summer.
And
Or maybe next summer.
I think Saka and Saliba maybe
Saliba
this summer.
is this summer.
And that's going to happen. I mean, he's been one of the best.
But what I'm saying is you're not going to be
year.
able to go out and, get these crazy signings if
I don't know. Are they making Champions League?
Yeah.
Right. So there's an automatic influx of cash because you're in Champions League. The owners, as abysmal as their owners can be, will fork over a little bit of extra money in the summer. Like, I think there will be money to be spent there on top of re-signing. But I agree.
Oh, in the summer for sure. I just don't know what kind of January, and I've seen it on multiple international podcasts. They need to focus on getting these guys extended.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you let two of those 3 walk, you're hurt.
Yeah.
Next year. Like, you need to re-sign at minimum 2 of the 3. Really, you need to sign all 3. Yeah. So if it is sign all 3,
they got Gabriel extended, center back.
I like, but I don't love.
Yeah,
and I know that's a hot take, probably with Arsenal.
I know they've been
but
talking to Saka for a long time, and then
Saka and Saliba have been talks extensively. Yeah. I think I haven't heard a lot on the Martinelli front, but it could just
you always fear that Real Madrid phone call to Martinelli or to Saka, and I think that's. If you're a
because of where Real's at, I don't know if Real is your concern, and it's not internally EPL. I think Real is the only team outside of the EPL that would be attractive to either of those players at this point. I don't see either of them going to Germany. I don't see either of them going to PSG. So I think Barcelona is a whole podcast on its own. I don't see them going to Barcelona. So I think it really is Real, and I don't see how well they really fit in Real's current project. With Rodrigo,
I absolutely see Martinelli going and teaming up with Vinicius. I absolutely see that. And that's the way they look at it at Real Madrid. They look at it as teaming up instead of as, am I going to get the playing time? Which is just, it's an incredible system that they have.
Yeah, Real's a different beast.
Yeah, just to finish my thought on that, as a soccer fan, you have the player that you want for the future, and just that fear is in the back of your mind. Is Real Madrid going to come calling? Because that's the team, Los Galacticos, that everybody wants to play for.
You can keep trying to feed me this fear that Bruno's leaving for Real. Bruno's never leaving.
Didn't say Bruno.
But it's been there. It's been there. Those thoughts have been there on you.
Just because I've seen it on Twitter. Just because I've seen it on Twitter.
To weasel that in there on me. He's not going anywhere. He is a Maggie through and through.
Here's what I want to say about Arsenal and Newcastle. Are we making an Eichel Davis scripted, beautiful storytelling highlight video, or are we living in reality here? Because both. in reality, and in whatever the real worlds, Arsenal and Newcastle are sitting on 1 loss each. Neither has faced a single bit of adversity at all this year. You've had your injuries. Everybody's had your injuries. There's been nope, Dylan, hear me out. Hear me out. Shit happens in sports.
Yeah.
And you talk about your Newcastle project, and I love the Newcastle project. I'm a noted lover of the Newcastle project, and I think it's going to go great for y'all, but it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows.
No.
And with Arsenal, to talk about them as well, they're going to hit adversity at some point this year. They're going to drop points. And I think that it's a little bit of a too good to be true type of thing so far. You don't go from competing. You don't go from a Europa League spot to winning the league in this Manchester City era. I just don't think you do.
Yeah.
And with Arsenal, my big concern with Arsenal is if they get a couple players that go down, because there's just not a lot on that bench that can produce in the Premier League. Especially now you've got Emile Smith-Rowe down for the year, and I think if you lose another midfielder, and then up top, I don't know what they have on the wings, or I think they play wide midfielders. I know you've got like Vieira in there, but he's more of a central guy. So it's just, we give praise to Arsenal every week, and I mean, there's only so much you can say. I mentioned Gabriel Jesus not scoring the goals in these. I get his hold up play and his creation in the box. I get it. I'm not dumb. I know how.
You're a Harry Kane fan. You have to respect that.
Yeah, no, I do. But Harry Kane also smashes them in every week. Also,
because he has to, because nobody else can score on that team with the injuries.
Yeah.
Somewhat seriously though, you put Jesus in a position where every other goal scoring player, which is somewhat what Spurs has run into, is out. Yeah. I think he has the ability to score when absolutely needed. He just isn't being called on to do that right now. And maybe that's silver lining thought process there on Jesus. But I think he's shown he has the ability to score when needed. So I don't necessarily know that saying that is a weakness of his is necessarily fair either.
So I am a Tottenham fan, and I will concede that Arsenal's been the best team in the league to this point in the year. I also know that it is November 7th, and there's a long season ahead of us. But this is the Match Week 15 recap, so whatever. We'll recap Match Week 15. And good win, Arsenal, at Stamford Bridge. Great job. That's something Spurs couldn't do. I'm not ready to say that they will contend with City for the title. I think February, March, we'll see them lose 2 games. City might draw 1. You look at I don't even think we were going to talk about City's game. It went as bad for them as it possibly could have. They rested Haaland and Foden. João Cancelo got a red card. They ended up having to bring
Haaland scored
in
the game winner, so they didn't fully rest him. But yeah,
they ended up having to bring him in to be like, okay, we can't lose this game, and they ended up winning. But that's just one of those things where it's like you look at it, and Man City, they can afford to literally just kick the shit around, kick the can down the road, and pull a win out of their butt. So,
all right, so devil's advocate. Two more things on these two teams.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, was it? Arsenal played Leeds.
Yep.
We said the exact same thing. Arsenal played about as bad of a match as they could have played.
I don't know about that.
They played horrible in the second half.
Yes, second half.
They could have and should have lost that game by multiple goals.
Yep.
And they still won. City had a red card in the 25th minute this week and still won.
Yep.
So you can argue that both teams have shown the ability to win games that they, in all likelihood, in all reality, probably should have lost. And I think when we hopped on the podcast the week after that Arsenal Leeds game, I said the same thing. This is where that was the week 2-3 weeks ago. I started to believe in Arsenal as a real contender because they won a game that any other pseudo contender couldn't win. And since that game, I don't think they have lost a Premier League game. Actually, I know they haven't lost a Premier League game.
Because that was a week ago, 2 weeks ago.
It was October 15th or whatever it was.
The Leeds game?
Yeah, it was 2-3 weeks ago.
Was it?
They had the City game postponed in there in the middle, but they haven't lost a game. They haven't lost a game since then. Revisionist history, but they haven't lost a game since then, and that was a game. Both the Fulham game for City and the Leeds game for Arsenal are games they should have lost, and they both won. That's why I think they are legitimate contenders for the title.
Is Fulham the team that City just played and beat?
Yeah.
There's a big freaking difference between Fulham and Leeds. Is
there?
Oh yeah. Oh, Dylan, let's be real.
Because Fulham is 3 points ahead of Leeds?
4.
Okay, I'm sorry. 4 points ahead of Leeds. Do they have the same games played?
Yeah, and the goal differential is significantly better for Fulham.
They don't have the same games played. I just pulled it up. You lied.
14 and 14? Oh, no, that's Brentford. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong line.
So we're
Dylan,
on a one goal
Dylan,
differential.
Don't look
and
at
one
the
less game played.
Dylan, don't look at the standings and tell me that Leeds and Fulham are on the same level.
Look at the games Leeds has won.
That's what yes, but they
Leeds
played
have won games against good teams.
Yeah.
And Arsenal stuck it out.
Yep.
And City did a job against the team that hasn't won games against big teams other than Fulham on match day 1, and that's match day 1. So my only point is they have both shown.
Wait, who did Fulham? I think you meant to say who Fulham played on match.
Yeah.
Who did
Fulham beat Liverpool week 1, right?
Okay, I forgot because you said other than Fulham. Never mind.
Fulham beating Liverpool week 1. I can't remember
1.
a game that Fulham should have lost that they won. And Leeds has shown us on multiple occasions, and we've talked about it a lot on the podcast, about how they do show up against big teams. And that was a game that Arsenal hung tough against a team that's played phenomenal against good teams and got the win. City did the same thing down a man, equally as impressive against a team that hasn't won those big games.
Hung tough.
Yeah. Got a last-minute winner.
Yeah.
So the question I'll leave you with, and I hate that we're not going to talk Leeds at length, but we are much longer than I expected for what felt like an uneventful week. But I should have known Newcastle overtaking Spurs on the table, it would be a full
I'm not
week.
even that mad about that. I'm really not.
So without talking about Leeds,
I'm just happy for you that it's all sunshine and rainbows right now.
I will give
because it won't always be.
So you say.
In your quest to the top.
I will,
maybe it will be.
Maybe it will be. I will give Leeds credit though. We were kind of down on them, questioning them 2-3 weeks ago. They finally won a match against a team that they should beat. So huge props to them. Faced some adversity against Bournemouth. They're now sitting in 12th. Like I am starting to feel good about Leeds staying up, but it could change very quickly come January. But the question I want to leave you with, and the question I want to end the episode on, who is more likely to drop 2 places, not just 1, 2 places come the end of the season? Arsenal or Newcastle? Is Arsenal more likely to finish 3rd, or is Newcastle more likely to finish 5th?
Newcastle's more likely to finish 5th.
So why is Arsenal? I can't believe I'm defending this. Like, I knew that was your answer, and that's why I asked this. So why is Arsenal not a legitimate contender for the championship?
Because there's the Man City tier.
Because City's that good.
Then there's the Arsenal tier,
so
and then there's everybody else.
And that's fine. So you're still putting City that far above them. And
yes.
and if you are, that's fine. And
absolutely.
I totally get where you're coming from on that. I just think it is a little unfair to say Arsenal 13, 15, whatever you want to call it, weeks in, isn't a legitimate contender when they're sitting 2 points clear of City. Because I don't think there is another team that could catch them. I mean, Newcastle is technically 3rd. There's no way Newcastle's finishing ahead of Arsenal. I don't think there's a way Tottenham's finishing ahead of Arsenal. So I think it is not fair to Arsenal to say that they are not a legitimate title contender at this point in the season, especially when we still have a January window where, as I haven't said this in like probably 2 months, Arsenal could feel pretty desperate. Arsenal could come into January going, we haven't been in this position in a long, long time. Let's spend and get the job done. And I don't know if City is in a position where they will spend up the wazoo. There's nothing wrong. I know.
Does City need to?
Right. But
I also saw that City was going to drop 150 mil on Rafael Leao.
That would be it. Wait.
Did you see that?
No. That's
You
stupid.
didn't see that? You didn't see that?
No, City won't do that, and Pep won't do that. They're not going to drop 150. Like, Leao's nice. He's good. But he's not $150 million good. And I think City's smarter than that. I haven't seen much from City that tells me they'll overspend by what would you put Leao at?
85.
I was going to say 100 max. 100 over. So even at his max, City's not 50 million overpay. We've never seen City do that. So I'm in the current position. I think there is a strong likelihood Arsenal is in the lead going into January, and drops $150 million and strongly competes with City, a City team.
You think Arsenal is going to drop $150 million in January?
They very well could.
When they have to give multi-million-dollar extensions to all these guys?
But they can. They can afford wages. Arsenal can afford wages right now. Wages are not a problem for Arsenal. And I think if you tell ownership, if Arteta goes to ownership and says, you give me $150 million and 2 weeks out of the end of the season, we are within striking distance of the championship, of the league title, that's $150 million that ownership group spends. Regardless of how poor their ownership group is, we've seen Kroenke want to win on numerous occasions. He's just won 2 championships in the last 2 years. Why not add a third? I think there is a very strong likelihood that if the club legitimately feels they're in the hunt, and if they're in the lead going into the World Cup, they are legitimately in the hunt, spends the money. And at that point, I don't see any reason they can't. If neither team makes a move, yes, City will win by 8 points. But I think there is a strong likelihood Arsenal outspends City in January and is a legitimate title contender.
I'm so mad we're at an hour and 15 minutes because I would counter that and say, who does Arsenal spend to upgrade the squad? Who do they?
Granit Xhaka is not a Premier League winning midfielder.
He's been a top 5 midfielder in the league this year.
But he isn't that. So if we're talking about regression, prepare for that.
So then I go back to my previous point and say it's going to come down eventually.
Right, and you spend so it doesn't.
Okay, all right.
Just like Newcastle, if they legitimately want to finish in a Champions League spot, I love Miguel Almiron. I'm probably buying a Miguel Almiron jersey in the next 2 months. He is not a Champions League winger. He just isn't. And the good teams recognize
Neither
that.
is Lucas Moura.
He plays really well in the Champions League. He plays really well in the Champions League, at least. At least you're there, and he's got 3 goals in the Champions League this year, right?
Lucas Moura?
Doesn't he? Or was that last year?
Doesn't
had
have
a bunch
shit
of goals
in the Champions League.
I feel like he's a Champions League guy, though. Was it maybe last
he scored
year?
a hat trick one May night in Amsterdam in 2019, and that's the only damn thing he's done.
I'm sorry, it couldn't have been last year because you guys didn't make Champions League last year.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to leave this podcast with this. Last year, after 13 matches, Chelsea sat top of the table with 1 loss.
Coming off of
what? A Champions League win?
So they were arguably the best team in the world.
No, but yes.
Arguably, they were the best team in the world.
Okay, arguably, sure. But that's neither here nor there with this argument.
Oh, okay.
They were sitting with 1 loss, a plus 26 goal differential. They had given up 5 goals. People are saying Chelsea, European champs, they're challenging Man City. They're doing it. They ended up finishing 3rd, well out of the championship.
Or they finished 20 points back or something like that.
Something crazy. I mean, Tottenham was closer to passing Chelsea than Chelsea was to finish in top.
Oh, by a lot. By 15 points, I would say, probably.
Yeah. And this is...
Chelsea was close. I think
same
Chelsea
number of matches.
Was Chelsea
as we
closer
are right now
to Conference League even?
They
might have been.
Potentially. Last year they scored 31 goals through match week 13 and allowed 5. And they're ahead of Manchester City, and they finished 3rd. So a lot is going to change.
A lot could change.
And Arsenal's a great team, but folks, they're not winning the Premier League. Thank you guys for listening. That has been the match. I'm just kidding. Dylan, take us home.
No, I mean, you're right. They likely aren't. I'm not saying they're likely to, but they
Come
could.
at me, Nick. Come freaking at me. There's no way Nick even made it to this point in the podcast.
Are you kidding me? This was gold. This was one of our best. This isn't even our
We finally got
wrap-up.
feisty. We finally got feisty with each other.
So for your, again, 3rd place in the table, co-host, Newcastle fan, Dylan Wilcox up here in Michigan, with my co-host, 4th place co-host, Reed, down in
Champions
Texas.
League participant.
And Champions League knockout in round of 16. participant, Reed Simpson, down there in Texas. This has been the Planet Soccer podcast. Match week 15, 13, whatever you want to call it, because
this wasn't even a match week recap. This was just a where are we at in the Premier League. Let's talk about it.
We appreciate you making it 1 hour and 20 minutes into the episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and we will hopefully see you next week if we didn't lose you this week. Take care.
So long from India's favorite podcast.